This summer, I had my first baby saved. I've been sidewalk counseling for like a year and a half before I had my first confirmed baby saved. And it was at St. Paul in Vandalia. There was like a car that was coming in and they were kind of like hesitant, like kind of like looking around and coming really slowly towards the driveway, like not really sure of where they were going. And so I offered them literature. I walked right up to the car because they were like almost stopped. And they rolled down their windows and they took it and I said, "This is for you to read before you go in." And that was all I could say because then the Planned Parenthood escorts were there just yelling at them. They drove in and I didn't like really take note of it at all because there were so many cars that had been in and out that day. Like I didn't really notice. And then a few minutes later they came out and they had dropped off a girl, then she went in. But I did notice when they came in a second time, because that's not normal. And it wasn't that long later, maybe like 10, 20 minutes later, they drove back in. They picked up the girl that they had dropped off and drove out with her. But this time when they drove out, their windows were down and the woman who was driving, she looked me right in the eyes and she said, "Thank you for what you do, keep it up." Brian Gibson was there and he was sidewalk counseling and he stopped the car and he like had him pull over in a parking lot and he was the one that confirmed that like, yes, they were there for an abortion and they changed their mind because we were out there on the sidewalk praying and we gave them like the information and the help that they would need to get through the pregnancy and deliver the child.
This summer, when I was sidewalk counseling at Uptown Minneapolis, I experienced my first baby saved. I was standing at the driveway there on a Thursday in July, and I looked over just in time to catch a lady turning in from the other direction. And so I waved, I signaled for her to roll down her windows, and then I offered her our "We're Here For You" brochure and our free help brochure. I simply said to her, "Will you look at this before you go in?" And then she took it and she kept going. And as she was going, the other sidewalk counselor with me, Terry, just called in a couple other things about how we are here for you, we can help you and your family and your baby. And then I just walked over to the door to wait for her to walk in. And as she was walking in, I asked her, "So are you here because of a pregnancy?" And she told me she was. So I asked, "Have you decided what you're gonna do with it yet, or are you still deciding?" And she said, "Still deciding." So all I told her at that point was just hang on to that brochure. And she nodded and walked in. A couple hours later, toward the end of my shift, I saw her walk out again. And because I knew she had the literature, I didn't say anything at this point because I was ready to just let the literature speak for itself. As I was finishing up talking to another client who was on their way in, I noticed somebody had pulled up behind me, so I turned around. It was her. She had pulled over on her way out and her windows were down, and she told me, "I'm keeping the baby, and thank you. And your video is what did it for me." I asked her if she wanted to be connected with someone from our staff or if there was anything we could do to help her. And she told me I have 2 boys already, so if it's a boy, we should be fine. I'm assuming she meant because of baby clothes and toys and such, but if it's a girl, we'll need some help. So I pointed out the places to her on our free help brochure that she could go to, and she just kept reiterating, "Your video is what did it for me," and so I told her, "Congratulations, thank you for letting me know."
I was sidewalk counseling with Janet, and it was about 1:30, quarter to 2 in the afternoon, and the escorts had all gone home. When we saw this car approaching, and she drove in very slowly. It was a beautiful Afro-American lady alone in the car, but she looked very distraught and somber. And I kind of waved, at her and so motioned to her, and she rolled her window down. And I told her, I said, "This is information for to help, all the help available for expectant mothers." And she was very happy to take it, and I said, "Here's a little gift for you too." And she took it, and she went halfway down the driveway and stopped her car. And so Janet came over by me and we were praying, "Oh God, I hope she's looking at the literature. I hope she's reading it. I hope something that we gave her is gonna touch her heart." And we were praying, and I know the one that, we prayed a lot of prayers, but the one that I remember most of all is that we quoted from Zechariah. It's Luke 1, 78, 79. By the tender compassion of our God, the dawn from on high shall break forth and shine on those who walk in darkness, in the shadow of death, and guide their feet down the paths of peace. And we're praying that she would choose that path of peace. Well, then we saw her car start up, and she went and turned into a parking spot right across from the door where you go in. And our hearts, they skipped a beat. We just held our breath and Jesus, Jesus, praying. The car backed out and she started towards us. She had both windows down, and instead of this somber look on her face, her eyes were sparkling and she had a smile on her face, both windows down, and she was crying. Anyway, Janet was on the side by this beautiful lady, and she saw, I had given her this box here. I want to show you. Inside of it is a little present, and this box was given to me by Mary. She's another Sidewalk counselor. Her husband came up with this idea. How do you like that? But anyway, it's a beautiful idea. So inside this box, we have a beautiful little fetal model of a 12-week-old baby. And at this time, their organs are all working and everything. Anyway, she came out of there crying and cupping this precious little baby in her arms and just looking at it and just crying. And she looked up at Janet and she said, "I'm going to keep my baby." And she's holding it, and Janet's crying, I'm crying, we're all crying. And it was a beautiful thing. It is such a beautiful thing to see when God's grace touches a heart and transform that lonely, somber look into one of joy and hope. And she said, "I'm going to be okay." It was just the most beautiful thing to see her cupping this little baby in her arms and crying. But 12 weeks old, and every organ is already there and functioning. It's an awesome thing to witness God's grace. It's humbling too, because we know we can't do it. I hand out lots of these, and not everybody comes back to us saying they're going to keep their baby. It's only when God's grace touches that heart, and that heart responds to that grace. It's a softened heart. You could tell she's going to be a beautiful mother just the way she was holding that little one.